stand and sing with us?
Be honest. All right, very good. If you're under 40, would you stand? Stay standing. Under 40, all right. Now, I don't know what young people is. If you're under 50, would you stand? If you're under 60, would you stand? If you're under 70, would you stand? How about everybody stand back up? All right. We had a great grow hour with Brother John Maurice from MacU. He shared with us about what they're doing for young people. And so we want to continue that in our service today as we talk about our youth. We have a meal plan after church that is a fundraiser for our youth. And a lot of activities going on. thank you for being here with us. I'm going to pray and we're going to continue to sing. Lord, we just thank you again for everyone in the room, young, old. What a blessing it is in the church that we can just be so diverse. And we thank you for the opportunity, Lord, to worship you in many different ways this morning. Just be with us all this day as we worship together, as we study together, as we eat together. We pray that it'll be a blessing as you look down upon your church this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thy hands have made. ladies that you could ever meet. One of the things that she used to do was that she liked to give her grandkids money. And 9 times out of 10, it would come in this form right here. A $1 bill folded twice. So, but because she was extra sweet and because I was really spoiled, a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but every now and then, this dollar bill would sometimes come in the form of a $5, $10, or even $20 bill, folded twice. Now, as a kid, this was awesome. I mean, you only got $20 bills on your birthday. Granny was giving them out during the weekday. So this was just awesome. Now, as a parent, my mom wasn't too thrilled about it. Now, she had good intentions, all right? So she just didn't want her mom, my granny, to be giving away all the money. So sometimes when she saw this happen, she would take the gift that was meant for me, and she'd give it back to my granny and exchange it for a $1 bill and say, that's all he needs. So time went on, and this kept going back and forth. Sometimes my granny was successful, sometimes she wasn't. But she never gave up, okay? She never gave up until she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she began to forget about these gifts. Day after day, month after month, and year after year, these gifts came less and less. Now, a few years after she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was my birthday, and we had already eaten cake, opened presents, everybody was getting ready to leave. We were cleaning up trash, and she called my name, walked over to me, stretched out her arm, and gave me this, a $1 bill, folded twice. I took it from her, I hugged her extra tight, and I said, thank her, and I put it in my pocket. So, later on that night, I was getting ready to take a shower, and emptying my pockets. I took the dollar bill out, and I thought, this is kind of different. It feels a little thick, so I unfolded it, and it was actually a $20 bill folded up twice inside the $1 bill. So I think it's safe to say that my granny won that. Definitely won that. And I think we can all agree at that point in time, this hidden gift meant the world to me. It really did. But it pales in comparison to the hidden gift that has been revealed to us, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ and the promise that we have in Him. This table that is set before us, it reminds us of that gift. The bread as His body, the juice as His blood, and His death as our life. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you so much for all the gifts that you have given us. But we especially thank you for the one gift that has allowed all of us to have eternal life, and that is your Son's death on the cross. Father, we thank you so much for that. And right now, I pray that every person in this room would read this time wisely to fulfill themselves. In Jesus' name I pray.
Holy, holy is He.
Hope you've had a great week and enjoyed our worship service thus far. I want to thank Whitley and the band for leading our hearts and getting us prepared to be around the Lord's table. Thank John for that great communion meditation this morning, reminding us what that time is really all about and the great gift that Jesus is and will always be to each and every one of us. Throughout this year, as we are almost, I guess May and tomorrow, isn't it? I guess. So we're already on up into late spring, early summer, I guess, if you will. One of the things we're doing this year at Paul Branch Church of Christ is every fifth Sunday we're trying to, that's going to be a youth emphasis Sunday, and then of course as well, we are bringing in different missions that we have supported or support over these many years. Just a couple of months ago, you remember Bob Molden was here representing Central India Christian Mission. He presented that particular work in our Grow Hour and then preached for us that Sunday morning as well. And this morning we are pleased to have John Maurice from Mid-Atlantic Christian University with us. During our Grow Hour, he presented the college, or the university actually, and all the great things that are happening and the challenges that they are facing here over the next 1, 2, 3, and even 5 years. So I'll encourage you to keep Mid-Atlantic Christian University in your prayers. They're going over some changes, I guess, here in the next month or two, I guess, if you will. And I'm sure he'll share a little bit about that. But the president now, President Perkins, he is resigning after being there 12 years, I believe, at Mid-Atlantic Christian University, I believe the 1st of June. He's going to be resigning or the latter part of June. And then John Brady, he will be president. Maurice, that particular time, he's going to be the interim president there of Mid-Atlantic Christian University. So I'm sure he's excited. So I want to encourage you as that transition is taking place. Certainly keep him and his family in your prayers and all the things that are going on up there in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, at Mid-Atlantic Christian University. One of the things that I haven't known John that long, but one of the things I do know about him is he is an avid Duke Blue Devil fan. And so when he called and wanted to come and present Mid-Atlantic Christian University, I almost initially said, no, forget about it, because I don't like you guys coming down here who like Duke. But anyway, we're pleased to have him here with us this morning. I want to encourage you, as we are having our fellowship meal afterwards, come up, introduce yourself, and those kinds of things. If you have any questions, certainly ask him. That's what he is here for. So I'm going to encourage you to do exactly that. Before he comes, I want to open up with a word of prayer before he comes and challenges us from God's Word. Dear God, thank you so much for this day. And as we just praised you through song, dear Lord, of us giving back of the blessings that you have given us as well as an act of worship. And also, dear Lord, remembering your Son and the death that took place there so that we can have the opportunity for eternal life and the great gift that remains to us as followers of you. And so, dear Lord, now our attention shifts a little bit as to John and the message that he's going to be bringing to us this morning. Dear Lord, I pray that you will speak through him and help him to speak your words and your words only. Thank you so much for the safety and travel that you gave him here. I pray you will be with him as he speaks boldly this morning from your word. Thank you so much for everything that you give to us, dear Lord. We thank you. We can't thank you enough for all the blessings that you bestow upon us each and every day. And one of the blessings that we have as followers of you is being challenged by your word. I pray that we'll take hold of what is taught to us this morning. And we won't just listen, and as your word tells us, just to be hearers of your word. I pray that we will take it and we'll be doers of your word. Thank you so much for him. Thank you so much, dear Lord, for you and for your Son. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Well, I was about to think that I was invited here because it was Youth Sunday, and I'm so youthful. I think that train has come and left. It is a joy to be here with you this morning. Whitley asked me this morning, she said, "Are you nervous?" I said, "I'm always nervous." But I want you to know you have helped make these nerves calm down a little bit, because when I walked through the doors this morning, all of you have just been friendly, you've introduced yourself, you've been kind, you've smiled, and that makes somebody feel right at home. And if those who come here looking for a church home receive the same treatment that I received here today, pretty soon you're going to have to be moving those walls out again and continuing to build this church. I thank Jason and Joey both for the opportunity to be here. And it's an honor to represent Mid-Atlantic Christian University. I'm a 1978 graduate, which was a day or two ago. And after that, I went to Cincinnati to work on a master's degree there. My wife and I had our oldest son who died while we were pastoring in upstate New York. He was almost 3 years old. 6 months later, I had a brother-in-law who was a Marine pilot who was killed in a helicopter crash. And I was so inspired at the ministry of the chaplains to a 20-year-old widow, to a squadron of shipmates, Marines, that when I got back to my church in upstate New York, I began to look at going into the Navy as a chaplain. And it was a great calling. It was a great, great ministry. And I had the privilege of serving the Navy and the Marine Corps for 25 years at sea and foreign lands and at war installations and training commands and hospitals and just one of the greatest opportunities in all of life. When I got ready and began looking at when I was going to leave the Navy and exit the Navy, I read a book, and in that book, the author was talking about seasons of life. And I was at a season, I was not going to get promoted again. I had achieved my terminal rank. I was not finding the fulfillment in my ministry in the Navy at that point that I had had every other day that I had gotten up and gotten ready to go to work. And something in that book challenged me. He said, are you leaving something or are you going to something? And I didn't want to be leaving the Navy. I wanted to be going to something. And I had the opportunity to go to Mid-Atlantic Christian University. Now, I had been gone for a long, long time and had not been back on the campus for many years. But I thought, what an opportunity God has laid before me to be able to go out and to represent Mid-Atlantic Christian University all around the world and what our great alumni are doing through the power of God. So this morning, I'm not going to talk to you a lot about the school. You have seen the products that Mid-Atlantic Christian University turns out. You've got a preacher. You've had preachers here in the past who have graduated from Mid-Atlantic Christian University. You've got a wonderful youth minister. You have seen the product that we put out. And you have been a great part of that in sharing in the ministry of MACU. But this morning I do want to preach the gospel because I am a preacher. This year will be 40 years since my ordination as a minister. I know I don't look like it since it's you, son. If you are able to stand, I would invite you to stand with me as we turn to Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, and read the Word of God. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And the Lord bless the reading of his holy word. Please be seated. Have any runners out here in the crowd this morning? Any runners? Got that, marathon number on the back of your car? The 10K on the back of your car, a 5K. I saw one the other day said 0.0. Anybody got that on the back of their car? We all have to, I guess, let ourselves be known in some form or fashion. In 1983, something amazing happened. 150 world-class runners ascended on Sydney, Australia for what was termed an ultra marathon. This was a 543.7 mile endurance race from Sydney, Australia to Melbourne, Australia. And on the day of the race, there was a 61-year-old guy that showed up that began to get jeered and ridiculed for showing up to run the race. In fact, this guy by the name of Cliff Young showed up, and he was not wearing a pair of running shorts nor a t-shirt that would wick the water and the sweat away from his body. Instead, he showed up wearing a pair of coveralls and some galoshes over his work boots. People were laughing. What in the world is this guy? What is he doing, thinking he's going to run this 543-mile race? What in the world is he thinking? Well, Cliff was not a runner. In fact, Cliff was a sheep herder. And he grew up on a ranch in Australia where his job, when there would be a storm that would be coming, was to go out and to round up the sheep. And so he had an unusual gait. They called it the Cliff Young Shuffle, and you can Google that. I'm not making this stuff up. You can Google it. I don't know what it looks like. Probably looked like me jogging. But Cliff Young had this weird run. But he would go out and round up the sheep and make sure that those sheep were brought back to safety. Nobody took him seriously that day when that race was going to begin. But the gun went off, and the bystanders just snickered, but that's the last we'll ever see, because when the gun went off, the 150 runners left Cliff back at the starting line. And he just started going. He kept that Cliff Young Shuffle up, going and going and going like the Energizer Bunny. Nobody thought that they would see him ever again. 5 days, 15 hours, and 4 minutes later, Cliff Young came shuffling across the finish line in Melbourne, Australia, winning the ultra marathon. Cliff Young did not win the ultra marathon by just a few minutes or a few seconds or a few hours. He won the ultra marathon by 9 hours and 56 minutes. The runners were astounded. How did this old guy, this 61-year-old runner, win the race? Well, Cliff Young wasn't a runner. And Cliff Young didn't know what he didn't know. The runners knew that what you would do is you would go for 12 hours and then you would rest. You would get up the next day and go 12 hours and then you would rest. Cliff didn't know you were supposed to stop at 12 hours. So he just kept going and going and going and going, and the Cliff Young Shuffle ruled the day. Folks, I think Cliff Young is an example for us in the Christian life. When we come to this passage of Scripture in Hebrews, we find the church beginning to get tired. The Christians are beginning to get weary. Jesus had said, "Behold, I am going to come quickly." And now time was fading by, and they are wondering, where is the promise of your appearing? Life was beginning to get hard for these Christians as the persecution began to hit the church. And people saw their neighbors being persecuted. They saw the apostles being persecuted. They saw people being put to death for no other reason than that they wear the name of Jesus Christ. And you can only imagine the discouragement, the idea of wanting to give up and to just drop out of the race, to throw in the towel that was going on in their lives. Folks, I can't help but think today that there are some parallels in our culture. Some of you are tired of fighting the fight over and over and over, standing up for the faith that you believe in, only to see it ridiculed in the public square. Some of you are going through circumstances and situations in your life where you just feel like, Lord, I need your help so much. Where in the world are you? Lord, I am so tired. I am so weary. Renew me today. Folks, the Christian life is not a sprint. The Christian life is an ultra marathon. It It's not just 26 miles, it's the 543 miles. It's starting the race and never giving up. It's staying focused, making it unto the very end. So this morning, I wanted to bring a sermon to you all today and to myself that basically says, how in the world can we be renewed and re-energized in our faith so that we can run the race and get the prize that is promised to those who finish. This morning, the sermon has 4 points. They are not weighted. I don't need, each point does not last the same amount of time. So follow with me, because you're going to think, man, that is one long first point. By the time we get to point number 4, we're going to have the intermission and eat fish. But the first point is this. When you begin to get tired in your Christian walk, when you begin to want to give up, when you begin to want to throw in the towel, when you begin to want to keep your voice silent instead of speaking up on behalf of the Lord Jesus Christ, look around and see that you are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. You know, the Christian race is the only race that you cannot run by yourself. When I preached this sermon before, I've told the people who were sitting out in the pews, who is in your great cloud of witnesses? Look to your left, look to your right, look in front of you and look in back of you. Folks, you are a part of a community of believers that these people are a part of your great cloud of witnesses. They are encouraging you and motivating you and teaching you and discipling you so that you can continue on and win the race. Who's in your great cloud of witnesses? Well, when you begin to get tired and want to give up, remember your baptism. Remember your baptism in Christ. I love Romans chapter 6. Romans chapter 6 is not a command for anybody to be baptized. Romans chapter 6 is talking to Christians, and he's basically saying, don't you know what happened to you when you were baptized into Christ? That old person of sin was buried. That old person has been put to death, and that new person has been raised to life. And there are other places where it's a great command, but Romans chapter 6 is not one of them. Romans 6 is to the church. Romans 6 is telling the believers, when you get tired, when you want to give up, when you feel like you're being overwhelmed by sin, look back to your baptism. Remember that that old person is dead. That old person is buried. That old person is gone. And you have been raised to walk in newness of life by the power of the Holy Spirit of Jesus Christ. Folks, whenever you feel like you're giving up, look back to your baptism. We always clap at our church when somebody gets baptized. I'll probably do that here as well. It's a great day. It is a celebration. But when you see somebody being baptized up here, you should go back in your own mind and remember yours. When you go to a wedding, it's not just about the couple that's getting married and standing up on the stage saying, I do, you done, that kind of stuff. Actually, it's for those who are sitting out in the congregation, witnessing that marriage, to remember their own marriage vows, that I will honor and cherish you until death do us part. Every time you see it, remember it. And remember your own. And go back to that place in your life. Another great thing in our great cloud of witnesses is the Lord's Supper. We do that every first day of the week. Why? Because we remember that we're not good enough. It's all because of God's amazing grace. And when we hold in our hands that bread, we're not just eating a piece of bread. Jesus said there's bread that fills the body, and then there's the bread that if you eat, you'll never be hungry again. He called that the bread of life. That's the bread of life. He talked about the blood of the new covenant shed for you for the forgiveness of your sins. And every time you hold in that cup, it's not just a little cup of juice. It is his blood that washes your sin away. When you want to give up, go back, and a part of your great cloud of witnesses is your baptism. Part of your great cloud of witnesses is the Lord's Supper. And then we have others who serve in our great cloud of witnesses, those who have impacted our lives and made a difference in our Christian walk. Let me tell you some. There are some in the Bible. You can look at David. David was a man who was not the most pure of heart at one time. In fact, he saw Bathsheba. He sent for her. He had sexual relations with her. She got pregnant, called her husband back, said, let's get him to go home, think the baby's his, we'll cover it up. Uriah would never go back and see his wife. He said, my soldiers are out in combat. I'm not not going to leave and go spend the time with my wife when I need to be with my men who are fighting the war. So when he never would go home, David put a letter and he sealed it and he gave it to Uriah to take back to the battle and give it to Joab, his commander. And Joab said, the letter said, when the battle is raging at its fiercest, Uriah will be out fighting. Uriah was one of David's mighty men. That's a sermon in itself. I'd love to come preach that one sometime. But David's mighty men. He was one of 30 amazing soldiers that he had. He said, draw back from the battle so that Uriah's life will be taken. So David had not only adultery, but murder on his hands. When the prophet Nathan confronted him, he repented. Then we see later on how he is a man after God's own. He is one of your great crowd of witnesses. There's nothing you have done as bad as David. Nothing you have ever done as bad as what David did. So don't think there's nothing God can't forgive you for. God wants to open his arms and embrace you and receive you into himself and into his life. There's Job. And you think of what it must have been like to have been Job. He lost it all in one day. One day. Lost it all. He had a wife that wasn't very supportive. Her advice to Job, just curse God and die. All of his friends, not his enemies, his friends, said, oh, Job, just give up, curse God and die. And Job said, I will not curse God and die. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name. Job is one who has, no matter what suffering you've been through in your life, it probably isn't as bad as what Job experienced in one day. And so when you feel like giving up because you're suffering, when you're tired, when you're sick, when you're hurting, when you've got a diagnosis, remember Job. Remember Job. He is a part of your great cloud of witnesses. And we could talk about John the Baptist and Stephen and Abraham and Noah. There's a lot of examples in the Scripture. Let me tell you about a couple who are in my great cloud of witnesses, because I think you have some in yours too. One of the people in my great cloud of witnesses is John Maurice Sr. My dad didn't grow up in the church. Some of you may know Louis Steins. Louis Steins was the preacher in First Christian Church in Roanoke Rapids. And my dad and my mom wanted to get married, and they needed a preacher. So what do when you want to get married? You go, and you don't have a church, you go find a preacher. Well, he wasn't just interested in doing the wedding ceremony for them. He was interested in sharing the gospel with them. My dad became a Christian, and that one person sharing the gospel with my dad changed the trajectory of our family forever. One person, one time, changed my entire family for eternity. My dad would later serve as a Sunday school teacher in that church. He would serve as a deacon. He would serve as an elder. He sang in the choir. I'll never forget, he always sang one verse in the Christmas song, and we used to joke him back in the day. I'd give anything right now if I could hear him sing that one verse. If I could just hear him sing that one verse. When I wanted to give up in the ministry, folks, because ministry can be hard. When I wanted to just say, hey, I've been at sea 154 days, my feet have not touched land, I miss my wife, I miss my children, I want to go home, I want to throw in the towel. I remember what my dad taught me, what my dad modeled me, how to take care of my family, how to love my family, what a work ethic was all about, what being a Christian is in a place of darkness. My dad is there cheering me on. Don't give up. Don't give up. You can do it. Another person in my great cloud of witnesses is Matthew Warren Maurice. Matthew was my wife and I's firstborn son. We were ministering in upstate New York. Matt got sick. He was running a little fever. My wife's a nurse, and he was drooling. And my wife said, you know, I'm going to take him to the hospital because I fear he might have epiglottitis. I'd never heard that word in my life. Type H flu attacks either your epiglottis or it attacks your spine and you get meningitis. It's type H flu. It attacked his epiglottis. His epiglottis began to swell. Took him to the hospital. The hospital didn't diagnose it. X-ray would have shown exactly what he had. They sent him back home. He's still drooling. We get him back to the hospital later on, and they miraculously get a tube down his throat. Treatment is you give someone, get a tube down their throat, you give them the antibiotics for 2 days, they go home. Never to have another problem. We were living in a small town, and basically they got the tube in, and they said, we're not used to dealing with young children, let's do surgery. And they went to do a trach, and I think when they pulled out the intertracheal tube, that basically they thought that the trach tubes they were putting in had collapsed, but both of his lungs had collapsed. And our little boy that went into the operating room saying, I love you, was now given to us in our arms. Let me tell you about Nat. Nat had blonde hair, blue eyes. I don't know whose kid he was. Came from my wife's side, who was just like her sisters. He was the smartest little kid I've ever seen in my life. Sing the ABCs, sing Jesus Love Me. I went to interview with this church in Painted Post, New York. They could care less on me. They voted on me, but they voted because of Matt. We got a unanimous vote to go and to be the minister in that congregation because he stood at the end of the table when they had about 40 people at that church dinner that night, and they had Matt say the prayer, and Matt talked about, Dear Jesus, and he prayed the most beautiful prayer. We'd be riding along the street, I'd say, Matt, who loves you? He said, Jesus loves me. The very night that he died, he and I were sitting at the piano, playing and singing, Jesus loves me. Beside him. When I feel like giving up, when I feel like throwing in the towel, I can see Matt standing there. Daddy, you can do it. You can do it. He's in my great cloud of witnesses. And there's preachers and parents and grandparents and elders and deacons and friends, and they all finish the race, and so can we. Who's in your great cloud of witnesses? Can you see a face? Can you hear their voice? Maybe you can say thank you and keep on going while they're still living. I encourage you to do that if you have that opportunity. Tell them, thank you. My life has been changed because of you. You'll never be a part of your great cloud of witnesses. We are running a race, and we have a group that is cheering us on in the stands. From 1994 to 1997, I was the chaplain at the basic school. Any Marines here? Oh, hoorah. Thank you for your service. I've never met a Marine officer that really liked the basic school unless they were staff. And you've heard every Marine a rifleman first. Well, that's where it comes from. Every Marine officer has to go for 6 months to the basic school. And for 6 months, if they're going to fly helicopters, or if they're going to fly jets, or whatever they're going to fly, they have to learn what it's like to be that infantry leader on the ground. Because if you're under fire and you need close air support, you want to know what it's like to be a pilot. For that pilot to know what it's like to be on the ground. If you're in communications or you're a lawyer, no matter what your job is, you go there for 6 months. Well, everything they do at the basic school is great. Everything they do is great. You know, their uniform inspection, when they would get a new uniform, they would line up right outside of my office in a long driveway. And they would be out there for 3 and 4 hours making sure those uniforms fit right. Man, we could do a uniform inspection on an aircraft carrier in 20 minutes. 6,000 people, we're done. You've got 250 Marines out here, and a uniform inspection, it takes them 5-6 hours, you know, and some of them are falling out because they're so hot and standing in attention for so long. Well, one of the things that they do when they get there is they do an initial PRT, that's physical readiness test. In the Navy, we do a physical fitness assessment. It's different. They have a 3-mile run, we have a 1.5 miles. I think that's way too long. The longest ship we have is 1,000 feet. So it's a little bit different. They have to do sit-ups, push-ups, and so do we. But that day, when they went out to run their initial UPFT, I went out with them. Now, the difference is they're in great shape. They just got done with Officer Candidate School. These guys are so hard and tough that you can just flick a quarter at them and that thing is going to disintegrate when it hits their chest. You know, it's like Superman. You know, all of them are Superman and Superwoman. They run fast. They're 22. The old guy might be 23, 24. I'm 40. And I go out to run. I got my little green shorts on. I got my little green shirt on. And I'm out there with my tennis shoes. They probably thought I was Cliff Young. But anyway, I'm out there and I'm ready to run this race. And the whistle blows. 250 lieutenants leave. Cliff Young shuffle, man. I'm going 3 miles. I go, and I don't get very far, and they begin to be making their way back. And so I keep going to the 1.5 mile point, and I turn around, and I make it, but I was passed twice, both at the starting gate and as they were on their way back. And I was tired. I was hoofing it. It was probably the fastest I've ever run 3 miles in my life. And I'm just sucking wind. Lord, why in the world did I come out here and do this? This was the stupidest thing I've ever done. But let me tell you what I began to see as I started making my way back to the finish line. The Marines, some of them finished it in 16 minutes. Some of them finished 17, 18. They were losing. And I'm sure they were tired. I'm sure they'd been sucking wind and they just wanted to rest. But what I began to see was those Marines turning around, running back down to where their fellow Marines were still making their way. And they were cheering them on and they were encouraging them and saying, you can do it. Don't give up. Push it out. You can make it. This is being great. If you want the very best that you can get, we're right here with you. Keep on going. You can only imagine my heart, as I was the last one in, as it should have been, when I had about a dozen Marines come back and run the last 200 yards with me across that finish line. Come on, chaps, you can do it. You can make it. Don't give up. You can make it. Folks, that's how I envision our great cloud witnesses. Whether they're standing in heaven saying, you can do it, don't give up. Or whether it's those who are confused with you and those who are teaching you and encouraging you and motivating you, they are a part of your great cloud of witnesses. Give thanks to God. Don't give up. Second, this morning, throw off everything that hinders you with the sin that so easily entangles. This morning, we could go through a whole litany of sins. You probably got them memorized. You know, the 10 Commandments, the 7 deadly sins, all of those kinds of things. I don't think we need to do that because we're talking this morning to Christians. But you know, the one thing that I have discovered in my 40 years of ministry, the one thing that trips us up the most is that one thing we think nobody else knows about. It's the secrets we harbor in our hearts. It's the secrets we think if somebody knew that I felt that way, that I had those thoughts go through my mind, that I did this or I did that, the world would cease to exist as I know it. Nobody would speak to me again. People would just shun me and banish me out. They would not have anything at all to do with me. But let me tell you something. The scriptures say that God knows our hearts. We want one foot in the world and one foot in the church. Jesus says, no, you're either all in or you're all else. There is no middle ground. Remember the story in Revelation? He says, because you are lukewarm, I will spew you out of my mouth. You're either hot or you're cold. Folks, I don't know what it is, but in our lives, whatever it is, that one thing that is keeping us from being an effective Christian witness, from running the race with power and faithfulness, let it go, turn it loose, give it away, let God hold it. Let someone that you know and trust help hold that with you. You know, the Catholic Church has a beautiful thing called confession. And so does the Christian church. Did you know that? The book of James. talks about the fact that you can take your burdens to the elders and let the elders pray for you, lay their hands on you and help you with the Lord. That's biblical freestyle in the concept. Confess it, give it over to God. Throw aside what's entangling you. This morning, do you believe people can change? I do. If you don't believe people can change, you're in the wrong place unless you came for lunch. I want you to listen to this story. It's called There's a Hole in My Sidewalk. It's an autobiography in 5 short chapters. See if you find yourself in this book. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to get out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in. I can't believe I am in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But I get out quickly. My eyes are open, and I get out immediately. Walk the place. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. Where are you at in that story? Some of us are banging our head in that hole in the sidewalk. The third point this morning is run with perseverance. Run with perseverance. That means you're not going to give up. It means you're going to be steadfast. It means you are not going to swerve to the left or to the right. You're going to keep your eyes fixed on the prize. And that's the fourth point this morning. Keep your eyes on Jesus. We're encouraged, we're commanded, we're implored to maintain our fix on Jesus. Hebrews 12 gives one of the most glorious looks at Jesus in all of the Bible. He says, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the source and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that lay before him endured a cross and despised the shame. He has sat down at the right hand of God's throne. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, so that you won't grow weary and lose heart. You see, Jesus didn't have a bathing shade either. We just celebrated Easter Sunday. What did it cost Jesus? It cost him his life. And it was our sin that cost him his life. It's his blood that gives us ours. And that's why the apostle says, don't take your eyes off of him. On August 7th, 1954, the British Commonwealth Games were held in Vancouver, British Columbia. England's Roger Bannister and Australian John Landy met together to run a 1-mile race that was called the Mile of the Century. How many of you ever heard of Roger Bannister? Most of you. He's the man that first break the 4-minute mile. How many of you have ever heard of John Landy? John Landy was the second person to break the 4-minute mile. This day, 35,000 people gathered to watch these two runners and who would decide would be the fastest runner on the earth. You know it's not going to last more than 4 minutes. I don't know if I'd have driven 4 minutes to get there, knowing it was going to be over so soon. Well, the world watched in anticipation as these two runners lined up. The two fastest men in the world, and when we're done, only one will be standing. They lined up and they were ready to go. The crowd is there in their silence. The gun sounds. And these two runners begin this miracle mile. They're running pretty much stride for stride, foot for foot, step for step, until about 90 yards are left in the race. John Landy looked back over his shoulder to see where Roger Bannister was in the race, and when he looked back over his shoulder, Roger Bannister passed him on the right side and won the race by 0.8 seconds. You remember Bannister. You don't remember Landy. And why did he lose the race? Because he took his eyes off the finish. Some of us are near the finish line. Don't look back. Some of us are just getting our stride. Don't look back, because when you look back, you lose momentum. Keep your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for all your blessings, God. We thank you for John, the messages that he's brought, the challenge that he's given us. God, I pray that you would just be with each and every one of us. God, we are all running our own race. And so, like John said, this is Christian walk is the only race that we have to run by ourselves. God, I pray that each and every one of us would realize that and would understand that we have to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. That we have to run towards the end goal. We cannot turn around. We cannot look back. God, I pray that you would just allow us to know that and to live that in our lives. Father, we thank you for all your many blessings. We thank you for just all you do for us. In Jesus' name, thank you. Let's stand.
With
Christ. We thank you guys for coming out. I've got a few quick announcements. I won't hold you too long. First thing, hold my paper the right side up. Sleeping with Fish, we are going, with us, like, Peggy, what's the starting age? First grade, is it first grade now?
Pre-K.
Pre-K through
Second grade.
second grade. We need you guys to sign up because there's like 2 people signed up. So pre-K through second grade, we need some more kids to come. I think that's going to be awesome. If I can go sleep with sharks, you can go sleep with sharks. So we got a big group going with the older kids. I think it's 3rd through 6th. So that's awesome. That'll be May 12th and May 19th. We'll be going one of the groups will be going to Pine Knoll Shores. The other group will be going to Manio. We're going to go hang out, sleep, and watch the sharks, not sleep with them. But it's going to be a great event. I think you guys should sign up. Come on out to that. There's sign-ups out there. As it has been alluded to a couple times, today is Fifth Sunday. We are eating today. Can I get an amen? Amen. Yeah. All right, so we have fried fish today. If you do not like fried fish, and only if you do not like fried fish, we have fried chicken. So the chicken is limited to only those who do not like fried fish. We have fish or chicken, potatoes, slaw, hush puppies, and then we have water and soft drinks. Last couple things tonight, 6th through 12th grade, we're going to recharge over Eastern Pines Church of Christ. We are leaving here at 5. So if you would like to go, let me know, and we'll meet here at 5. We'll be back by 8. We'll eat there. Brian Warren, one of Hall Branch's Timothy's. Brian Warren is preaching tonight, so let's go support him. Any other announcements that I missed? I got 2. I know I missed, but any other ones? May 20th, WHAM, Women's Appreciation Meal. I made to say that. Women's Appreciation Meal. We are going to prepare a meal for the women. Okay, that's right. May 20th at 6 p.m. Sign up at the connector. I believe somebody will be out there to talk to you, maybe Steve or somebody will be out there to give you more info. And last but not least, today also, I gotta find it, is Lights of Hope Celebration Day for Relay for Life. So Natalie has got some bags set up there in the Middle Life Center on the tables. If you would like to make a donation for Relay for Life, just drop some money in there into the bags on the tables. I'm going to pray for our food, and then we're going to go eat. Youth, you get to go last because we're serving. As soon as you get to go first, John. All right, I'm going to pray for our food, and then we'll be dismissed to go over there, and the line can go ahead and start going through and get your food. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for this day in your house. Thank you for good food. I pray that you would just bless us with that food. God, bless us with fellowship. Thank you for all the folks here at Hall Branch and their support for the youth here. I pray that you would continue to bless us, God, and continue to watch over us and protect us. Thank you for all you do for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Let's eat.